Welcome back. In this session, we'll talk about adding maps to our applications. The map is the mere graphical presentation of the locations. The actual location, in fact, is a separate entity from maps. So in this session, we'll begin with showing a map in our application. Now, to get to that, we also need to get some extra settings from the Google APIs. I'm going to show you all of that in this lesson. So let's get started. I'm going to head into Android Studio, and in here I'm going to start a new application, empty activity as usual. I'm going to call it Maps App, and I'm going to hit the finish button. Now, the moment it loads up, I want to show you a little bit of a trick in making your maps activity, because you could actually start writing the code on your own, but then we would have to change a few things in Android Studio and basically the grader. But instead of that, I'm actually going to go ahead and use the Google Maps activity, and that's going to make a lot of the code for me. And I will explain to you what those codes are and why do I basically need them. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say a new, and in the new I'm going to search for the Google, and the Google I'm going to go for Google Maps activity, and it's going to basically make a new activity for us, which is the Maps activity. It doesn't matter what you name it in here because we're not going to really use this, we're just going to copy stuff from it. So I'm going to hit the finish button, and I will explain to you what it did for us. The first thing is it added this Google Maps API XML, which is basically telling us what is the SHA certificate for this application that we need in the Google Maps console. It's also giving us a place to copy the API key. That's another thing that we need. However, there's other things that this thing has done for us. When it added the Maps activity as well as the Maps layout, it also added a new dependency for us. That dependency is basically Play Services Maps. So these are basically the steps that we had to do. In the Google Maps, or rather the Maps activity and the activity maps layout, there are also some code that it has done for us. And that's what I'm going to be copying from these two, and I'm going to show you how we're going to use it. So for now, I don't need to worry about anything in the grader or anything in the values. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the activity maps. I'm actually going to go to the code part of it. I'm going to copy this fragment, all of it by its entirety, and I'm going to go to my activity main and I'm going to paste it in here. So what I need from this fragment is basically a few things. I need the fragment of the type support map fragment manager. I want to give it an ID. I want it to have a width and height, and that's about it. So I don't need any of those. This is a good place for you guys to re-exercise your understanding of how using codes and making layouts they work. So now we made a fragment of this type, which this type is now available to us because the gradle for it is also available, and that basically makes a fragment that covers the entirety of the screen. So that's the first thing that we want to be doing. And of course, because I've done that, I don't need the activity maps anymore. I can just delete it. Get rid of that, delete anyway, perfect. Now I'm going to go to the maps activity and see what we're going to copy from here. I need basically two things. One is I need to get this part, which is basically making my fragment. This is really nothing new. This is something we have done with the fragments in the past, which basically says map fragment, support fragment manager, and then find this guy that is called map, and then in the map fragment, once it is ready, get map and async it. Now what does this async actually do for us? It basically says whenever the map is ready, sync that map with the fragment. But how would the application know when the map is ready? To do that, we actually have to extend our main activity to a class called onMapReady callback. And that's something that you can find in your maps activity as well. It's done up here as well. And the moment you do that, basically this thing happens on map ready. I'm actually going to go in here and say, well, let's implement all of those. I'm going to hit Alt and Enter, and it says you have to implement the member on map ready. And what do you want me to do when the map is ready? I'm going to say, let's call this one Gmap, and I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to have my own map in here. Let's call it var my map of the type Google Map. And of course, because I can't initialize it right now, I'm going to say this is a late init var. And then I'm going to say when the map is ready, my map becomes this Google Map. So let's see what's happening in here. And let me see why it's giving me a a warning. That's all right. Let me delete that other activity. This part is a little bit tricky because there's a lot of code that you have to write and a few things that you have to be mindful. So I'm going to quickly re-explain this entire thing so we understand what's happening. So in theory, if you didn't want to do the way I did it, what you had to do is you had to go to your build grader. You had to add this one, Google Play Services Maps. You had to sync your grader. And once you're done with that, in your activity main, you had to add a new fragment. That fragment type name should have been support map fragment manager. And then in your main activity, you actually had to go ahead and say, I'm extending the main activity to onMap ready callback. So whenever the map is ready and Google has done, or Android application has done its communication with Google, and Google has granted us the permission to use the map, then I'm going to set my map to be the map that is currently ready, and I can use it for whatever I want to use it for. And we apply the map within a fragment to our application. So we apply the map on top of our view. So that's the starting point for this. Now there's more steps to it, and those more steps have to do with this guy, the file that has been added in here. This file isn't really doing anything. This is just a text file that allows us to copy some code from here that we need for our Google Developer Console, and then applies the API key in there. The API key, as always, has to actually go to basically your manifest, and that's what it has done in here. It has said that metadata goes to here. Metadata looks at the file or points to the file that are in the string Google Maps API. You could either keep the combination of these two files, or you could just put the API key right in here and delete that file by its entirety. Before we do any of these things, let me show you what we have to do in the Google Developer Console, how we should get our API, and then we worry about how we're gonna use it in here. So let's go ahead into Chrome. And in Chrome, I'm going to search for Google Developer Console. If this is the first time you're coming to this console, it's probably going to ask you for some permissions and whether you want to make a project right off the bat or not. I have done this. I think this isn't really my main account, so I've done some tests in here, so there might be some stuff. In any case, I'm going to show you what you have to do from the very beginning. Let's say here at the very top, you want to go ahead and you want to make yourself a new project. I'm going to say there is a new project. This new project is going to be Android App Trial Maps, and then I'm going to hit create. And once it is created, what I want to be doing is I want to basically get myself new credentials, and for those credentials I have to enable different APIs. So basically you have a project. In the project you have credentials, and each credential can use some of the many services that Google supports or provides basically. So here I'm going to go ahead and say in the credentials, and I'm still in the wrong project. Just keep that in mind if you have many projects. So I have to switch to this new project that we created. I'm going to say in that one, let's create credentials. I'm going to say I want to make an API key, and this is going to be our API key. So you can just copy that value. Then if you just make an API key, that's not really the best idea. You want to basically restrict it so nobody else can access it. So to do that, I'm actually going to go ahead in here. I'm going to say in my API key, let's go ahead and edit that. In the edit, you can actually restrict it. So here I'm going to go ahead and say application restriction is Android applications, and then it says which applications do you want to use, and here it says you have to enter the package name and the SHA-1 signing certificate key. So I'm going to say add an item. Here's the package name, the very first thing. The package name is from your Android manifest right at the very top. This is the package name, or you could just get it from any of your main application files. So com.audiinstitute.mapsapp, that's my package name. And then it says give me the SHA-1 certificate for it. The certificate for it is the one that the Google file automatically created for us. However, I want to show you another way of building that in case you needed it. So what you could do is you could actually go to the top right corner of your Android Studio, go to the Gradle. In the Gradle, you open your Maps application, open the tasks, In the tasks, you open Android. In the Android, you open signing report and you double click on that, and it will build everything for you, including everything that you need, which in this case is the SHA1. And that's the key that we need, which is the same key as the keys that's up here. It's basically some sort of a certificate that you can use to sign stuff. I'm going to say this is the SHA certificate, and I'm going to hit done, which means now our application is now stored within this API credential, and this API credential can only work for this particular app. And this way you make sure that nobody can steal your API key, or nobody can use it for things that they shouldn't be using it. Once that is done, there is one final step that we have to do in our developer console, and that is to enable the right API for the new credential that we created. Basically, the way it works is that you have a credential, and for that credential you say which of the many services of the Google do you want to use, because obviously they are not all by default enabled. So I'm going to head into the APIs, and in the APIs I will see a list of the APIs, or if you have multiple projects, you can just switch between them and it shows you the list of the APIs. And here what I want to use is I want to basically use the Map SDK for Android, and I'm going to go ahead and say enable that for this project, basically, if it wasn't enabled for your case. I think for me we are on the wrong project, so if we go to this project we can actually enable it. So enable that, and now that it's enabled, it means that my applications, the ones that have been included in this API restrictions, they can actually use the Map SDK for Android. Now I'm going to copy the API key. I'm going to head back to Android Studio, and we are absolutely ready to go back to what we want to be doing. Keep in mind that if you were doing the thing I was just showing you, signing report, then you have to change back the application up here, and you have to rerun on the application itself. So now in here, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to actually go into my Android Studio manifest, and in the manifest I'm actually going to skip this whole thing about using the Google Map API string. I'm going to replace this key in here myself. So this is my API key, and then there's a few final things we have to do. Let's go ahead and say we had an activity called Maps activity that we deleted, so let's just get rid of that one. There are a lot of random code in here, so I'm just going to delete those, so I don't need any of those. And I'm going to get rid of this part as well, because for now we don't need it. I will explain to you in the coming lessons why we need them. So the only thing that should change in your default manifest is basically having this piece, metadata, added somewhere within your application. If you want, you can actually take that and put it at the very bottom of your application. So this is how your application looks like, and then at the very bottom of it there is the com google android.geo API key, and then you put your API key in there. So that's one thing, and then I can actually delete this file because I don't need that one either. And now almost everything is ready for us to run our application. There is one final step that is probably not necessary for most people who are watching this, but that is you have to make sure that the emulator you're using actually does use Google Play services. So if that is not the case, then you have to make yourself a new emulator, and sometimes the emulator might actually ask you to update your emulator with the latest Play services. If it does that, then you must update it, otherwise it's not going to work. So I'm going to hit the run button. I'm going to go to Android emulator, and we're going to wait to see what happens in here. And once my application loads up, we should be able to see this, which is basically the maps representation. So here we have the maps. We can actually scale it using the command button or the control button. If you're using a Windows machine, we can pinch and rotate it, and that's basically the very first step of creating applications that they use the maps. So let's keep it up to here. In the next lesson, we're going to make a copy of this project, and we're going to add more code on top of it.